Welcome to Vision Pros, the show all about spatial computing, visionOS, and getting work done on the Apple Vision Pro. I'm Tim Chatton, host of the show. This episode is sponsored by Glisten. Learn a language by listening. Learn more at www.glisten.ist.
We're actually building a little set of utilities, is probably the best way of describing them. And we frame them as what we call ambient information visualization. So we're not going to do a big app that's going to be a car game or, a word processor or anything like that. We want to create these little objects that sit in these people's spatial computing experiences and give them insight into a particular thing that they might be interested in. So there's these little tiny things that run alongside your other windows and things like that.
Welcome back to another episode of Vision Pros, and what may be the last episode before Apple does their formal pre-launch unveiling of Apple Vision Pro. My guest today is Oliver, the Director of Design and Innovation at Contxtual. Contxtual is a user experience company that is exploring and creating the future of user experiences and interaction design with the focus currently on spatial computing. They've been exploring spatial computing for the past 4+ years, and prior did tons of work in iPhone, iPad, and Apple Watch. Oliver, of all the guests I've had on so far, has had the most experience in other headsets, including the HoloLens and the Magic Leap 1 and 2. And we discussed those headsets along with the Apple Vision Pro and all the possibilities that we're about to experience when visionOS and the Apple Vision Pro launches in the next few weeks here. If you want to support this podcast, the best thing you can do is go out and download and try Glisten. Glisten is the Good Listen podcast app for language learners. It's all you need to immerse yourself in a language on the path to becoming fluent. I'll be sharing more about Glisten later on in this episode, but for now, download Glisten, which just launched for iPad and is coming soon to the Apple Vision Pro. As a reminder, you can get early access to both Vision Pros and iPad Pros by subscribing in Apple Podcasts to either show that now has a heavily discounted yearly rate for those that want to lock in that year, or by supporting the Patreon at visionpros.fm/Patreon. With that, here's my interview with Oliver. Enjoy. Welcome to the podcast, Oliver.
Thanks, Tim. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's exciting to have you on. And you reached out to me after one of the recent episodes I did with Clarko, I believe.
I've listened to them all. It's been really great to have them as a way of understanding who else is exploring this space and what sort of things they're investigating and trialing. So thank you very much for doing all of these interviews.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always fun at the very beginning as things are so very new and we're trying out all these different ideas and concepts of what could it be and the possibilities of this new platform we're about to get our hands on here.
That's the exciting time before everything's really locked down, right? Like where there's still the opportunity to sort of really invent or explore or,
Yeah, right. Like for iPhone parlance, that's when Tweety invented pull down the refresh. Like
exactly.
A developer could invent some like custom hand gesture that Apple adopts and becomes just how we do things. And
yeah. Looking forward to that.
Yeah. So prior to getting into spatial computing, what kind of work did you do in user experience?
So my background's originally in psychology and in human-computer interaction. And as a basis for the last sort of 24 years, I've been working and consulting in user experience. So specifically research with end users, with people who are going to use a digital service, understanding their needs and behaviors, and of course designing those and doing the strategy around different digital platforms, different interfaces, etc. And one of the ones that I really focused on in the early thousands was mobile UX. And so, did a lot of work, even, early days of Nokia, the wireless application protocol, Palm Pilots. I know ATP are talking about Palm Pilots again at the moment and stuff. And so that was a lot of fun. And when the iPhone launched, obviously in 2007, that was a momentous occasion, especially for interaction design, right? And for user experience, because suddenly it drew a lot of attention to what was the importance of the user experience and how to get that right and to think through this new opportunity of direct manipulation, right? Of being able to touch an app and at launch. And And also prioritizing the customer experience in that the customer could decide what apps they wanted where. The phone was just an app. It wasn't sort of this functionality that sort of took over the phone. And I think that approach was very, customer friendly. And actually we see some of that in the Vision Pro today as well.
Yeah, the whole concept of the screen just transforming into whatever you want to be, having custom keyboards, and just it's the world's your oyster as far as designing what the screen contains is exciting.
Exactly.
2007, yeah.
And obviously we'll get to it, but visionOS is almost the polar opposite in a good way, in that it shows you nothing until you want something.
Yes. So, augmented reality, virtual reality. What's your background here?
Yeah, so we really saw my experience with computing, I suppose, goes back to the Apple IIe and the Apple IIc, prior to the Mac even, and really seeing that transition from command line to obviously the Mac and the graphical user interface and that different interaction type, and then obviously the internet as well, really changing how we interacted with computing, and then mobile. And we were sort of looking at what is the next era beyond the mobile computing era. And there are a couple of things that really struck me about spatial computing that fascinated me. And it really, that critical aspect that we talk about is how can we enhance the real world with digital information and experiences? So we're sort of really laser focused on that, not even on mobile AR and definitely not on full immersive VR. They have their roles. We're not saying that that's not our focus. So we really want to focus on adding utility and functionality to people's digital experiences in their everyday sort of, I want to go in and get stuff done type of approach.
Yeah, and the cool thing about visionOS to me is it seems like you can run just unlimited apps all at the same time. And if you have something that's non-obtrusive, that's like an AR app that kind of is additive, you could be running some productivity apps alongside this unobtrusive, like in the Mac parlance, you have all these menu bar apps. You might have all these just little, just additive, delightful, just AR apps on top of your other things you're working with.
Yeah, and that's what we are excited about, is the people creating and defining their own spatial computing experiences. We're limited at the moment by these rectangles that sit in front of us, whether that's an iPhone or a XDR display or an iPad or a Mac laptop that have to, by their nature, contain things in a certain space. And obviously spatial computing gives us this opportunity to put things in places that maybe make more sense to us, or that we can group spatially, maybe a particular set of, an email I'm working on plus a numbers document and my calendar all sit in one particular area of my view, so I can focus on those. And then I'm going and focusing on a collaborative experience that I'm having with my colleagues on a freeform board and things like that. So arranging these things around us in places that make sense to us, I think, is incredibly powerful. And having them interact in a way that's different to Windows on a computer screen that are contained by that. Both the dimensionality of 3D and depth as well. Being able to put things behind things and so on. So I think all of that's going to be fascinating.
I do wonder if there's going to be a way to hide an app, like on Mac you can Command H an app to hide it. On iPad you have different stages, and it seems like you just have one big stage, and if you want to get rid of something, you're more or less closing it.
Yes, and while the visibility of some things sort of can fade into the background a bit more, if there are other things in front of it, obviously, that sort of can demote it visually. But yeah, I think that's interesting. Also, Command Tab as well, right? As an interaction of switching between apps or bringing them to the front. I think there's things that might be additive later on in visionOS, and I think we're starting with the basics, and I think that's the perfect place to start. Let's start simple and easy, but there's a lot of opportunity to add these types of interactions as the platform develops.
Yeah, Command Tab's an interesting thing, because in visionOS you just look at it, and that's what brings the attention to it. So I'm going to be very curious when I get my hands on Apple Vision Pro. Is there a Command Tab, and what would that do exactly. It might just bring the focus to it without you needing to look at it. I don't even know.
Yeah, and to me, it's more like almost maybe a space is a better analogy where I'm working in a particular set of windows and I have them all arranged, and then I command tab to a different space that comes in front of me and is the layout that I want of those different screens or documents.
It'd be interesting if there would be gestures to like move your world into a different space. Like I don't know what it is. You're swimming or something. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how that all develops. So prior to working in spatial computing, what have been some of your favorite experiences you've designed for, Apple Watch, iPhone, and iPad?
Yeah, certainly. Because we've been in there from the very start of a lot of those Apple platforms, we've had the opportunity to work with, some of the telcos and the airlines and so on here in Australia and the banks. So, we've probably researched and designed over 100 mobile apps and websites, including, one of the first iPhone banking apps in Australia and, as I said, for the telcos and airlines. And we did the first iPad app for Australia's national broadcaster and for Fox Sports here in Australia. And we worked with Salesforce on an AR iPad app and a bunch of Apple Watch apps for everything from people with epilepsy to exploring the opportunities around the detection of the onset of a post-traumatic stress disorder episode for Army veterans via a wearable as well.
Very cool. So in the spatial computing world and AR, VR world, what headsets have you had personal experience with? Because me personally, I've only really used PlayStation VR 1 and 2, and then at a very old PAX East, I had like the first Oculus experience on the demo, and that was awesome. But yeah, from my understanding, you've tried pretty much everything out there.
Yeah, and I think that's the joy of having your own company. You get to decide where the budget goes, and because for that, because of my background in psychology and human computer interaction, I've long had an interest in the more academic side of things, and that's where a lot of the research around head-mounted augmented reality, so these headsets that we talk about, has really taken place over the last bunch of years, right? But because of that, they're doing a lot of research with these types of devices as well, and I really like that approach of getting a device and playing with it. So we've got a HoloLens, and one of my first experiences with the HoloLens was with Mark Pesce, the co-author of VRML. He's a friend. But that really sort of triggered this, okay, we can put digital content in the real world, overlaid in the real world, and we can also interact with it through a multimodal interface, right? With voice and with gesture, and there's a different visual, etc. But we've also had the opportunity, we've got the Oculus Quest 2 and 3 and the Pro, and while the 3 has an all right mixed reality experience, I think it's important for us as UX researchers and designers to understand these design patterns that the Oculus is using, that HoloLens is using, and so on, so that we can see what works and what doesn't. And the analogy for me is, back in the day we used to have Windows Phone and BlackBerry and Android and iOS, and they were all trying different things, and that led to a better overall user experience, right, over time. Right. WebOS, for example, as well.
I loved WebOS.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It was great. And so devices like Snap Spectacles, so they're developer edition only, but they're a lot of fun. And then headsets like the Magic Leap 1 and the 2, I think, those headsets are our favorite. Very powerful, really that optical see-through approach to spatial computing and augmented reality that we really see as quite useful and interesting. And they really did a lot of thinking around the UX and the richness of the UX, especially on Magic Leap 1, because it sort of had this, it was pushing for a consumer experience as well as an enterprise experience back then, whereas now it's much more sort of clinical on focused on the enterprise experience. And of course, Apple Vision Pro.
And you guys have been in a couple labs, which is very exciting.
Yes. Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't have one, but
right. They are very hard to come by here. Yes. Magic Leap in being able to optically see the world around you. Mm-hmm. What's that experience like? Like, you have a screen there that you're able to like glance up at, or are you able to overlay stuff with the entire world? Or
yeah, so I think that's we sort of keep coming back to the Magic Leap 1 experience as really well thought through user experience design for spatial computing, in that you could take an object and let's, for example, it's a clock, right? So it's super easy to understand. Everybody knows what a clock is. You could create a clock, and this digital object was something that you could grab. You could magnetically, it would do the plane detection. So it knew there was a wall that was there, and you could stick it to the wall and slide it up and down and move it around. And then you could either leave it there and so on, or you could actually lock it there. And so what that meant was that object would be there, it would stay there. You could turn the headset off, you could go away, you could come back, and it would still be there.
Yeah.
And I think that's really powerful for a spatial computing experience. And also the fact that it didn't have additional UI attached to it. So it just felt like an object, or looks like an object in the real world. And, that is different from what we're seeing with visionOS, where everything has a close button and a grab handle, or the vast majority of things do. There are some exceptions to that. But I think they really thought through that digital object in the physical world type of experience. And I think Apple will get there, but it's really impressive to see the thinking that went into these types of experiences years ago to create these really lovely and engaging UX designs.
Yeah, one thing I think that will be popular in visionOS are like photo frames that you put on the wall of your desk, and I think that would work, and you can just leave them there and come back to them.
Yes, so, and this is where I think there's a lot of nuance, especially when something lives in your world all the time, like a photo frame. You potentially want it there all the day on your work desk, or a clock on the wall, right? Is that if you hit your collect button on your Apple Vision Pro, all the windows will come in front of you, right? I don't want my clock to pop off the wall at that point, or my photo, So there's things like that. There's things like, I don't want a grab handle and a close button on that photo frame sitting there all the time. It's these little nuances that I think over, the course of the evolution of visionOS, we're not even at 1.0, right? We'll see those types of things happen. But to see that thinking had gone before, and I think that those opportunities will arise again in the future.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I'll be curious when we get our hands on visionOS how many times a day I do need to reset the world. I know in PSVR 2 I do it somewhat frequently when I'm in like the movie theater mode, but not that much when I'm actually in a VR game. So we'll see what's needed there.
Yeah, and I think certainly over the last however many years it's been, their Apple OSs have got better at retaining state, right? Like, so you restart your Mac now and everything pops back up seconds later exactly where it was. My constant frustration at the moment is I've got my display in front of me, my studio display, and then I've got two iPads next to it that I use for continuity, but what happens is every now and then they'll get out of sync and they'll go to the other side of the display, and it's like really frustrating because I've got to, and I'm like, I hope that doesn't happen in visionOS where I'm spending half my life rearranging the screens back to where they were. So
with Magic Leap 1 and 2, for those that have not worn these or seen them, can you describe the actual hardware by like with the Apple Vision Pro, it's like a big pair of ski goggles, best way to describe it. You have a screen over your entire face. Is that not the case here?
Yeah, that's right. So the way that we think about it when we're looking at all of these headsets is we divide them into sort of two main categories. The first one is what we call optical see-through. So that's where it's essentially a pair of glasses, so you can see through the glass, and the digital content is overlaid. And usually there's a small square of content, or a small square of screen that sits over the middle of that. And then the opposite to that, or the alternative to that, is the video pass-through video that takes camera view of the world and then plays that through the screen. So what that means for the Magic Leap is that the headsets are more glasses-like in that you can see through them without turning them on, etc. But that they're a bit more closed in, I suppose. So you have a smaller field of view, so the area of content that you can put digital content, or the area of screen that you can put digital content on tends to be a lot smaller. So the Magic Leap 1 was what we call 50 degrees field of view. The Magic Leap 2 was 70 degrees field of view, whereas the Apple Vision Pro, I think, is 110 or something degrees field of view. So that content area is a lot smaller. And it's also a bit more washed out, right? Because you're trying to create light overlaid on the real world, and you need to have really strong light, right? And the headset itself, both the Magic Leap 1 and the Magic Leap 2 are cabled as well, like the Apple Vision Pro, but instead of having the battery on the end of the cable, they've got the compute and the battery on the end of the cable. So it's sort of like a small, like a bread plate type size almost, and quite thick. And on they actually had a ARM chip in the Magic Leap 1 that ran quite cool, and on the Magic Leap 2 they moved to an x86 processor, so it gets quite hot quite quickly. But you have to find somewhere to put it, right? And the other thing with Magic Leap 1 and Magic Leap 2 is they both have a hand controller as well. So you can imagine you're trying to put these goggles on, then trying to find a place for the puck to, clip onto your pocket or onto your belt, and then at the same time you've got a hand controller. I think the AVP approach of slip the battery into your pocket and put the headset on, is a lot easier, not having to worry about controllers especially.
Yeah. I was always wondering why the processor and stuff wasn't in that battery pack, and we could just upgrade that pack every couple of years to get a faster Apple Vision Pro.
It's a very interesting question, yes.
Yeah, but I'm sure Apple has their reasons.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
Yeah, but with all these headsets, have you tried any of these outdoors? It seems like that would be a challenging environment to work in, especially Australia with nice bright sun.
Yeah, it's a beautiful day here at the moment. No, we haven't. Okay. We've walked around within buildings, but not outside. The exception to that is probably the Snap spectacles. But the biggest issue is that the amount of light coming in from the surrounding environment, you need to really power an image to make it bright enough to see in those types of environments outside.
Yeah. And I imagine you just burn through battery even faster.
Yeah.
Because, the phone, when you have that cranked up to max, it just, you can tell it's just like burning through the battery.
Exactly.
So what was your very first headset experience, and was it like an aha moment from the first moment, or did it take you a while to grasp what this potential could be?
Yeah, it was, the HoloLens was the first sort of mixed reality, augmented reality headset experience, and that was really powerful, because of the AR aspect, because there were digital content, but also that multimodal aspect. And that really resonated with me. I think one of the things that we haven't fully taken advantage of with user experience design, and this is even with mobile, is the full power of context and those different, what we call modalities, interaction types, being voice or gestures or sound, both inputs and outputs. So the HoloLens was good in that you could use your hand to gesture things, and also you could interact via voice. You could talk to Cortana embedded in HoloLens, and that was really powerful. And then that Magic Leap 1 experience was really powerful, more from a AR and just dialing everything up. The resolution's much better, the brightness is better, the care around the graphics and the animations in the onboarding experience are phenomenal, very Apple-like in that. So that's where it sort of really went, wow. I went, wow, okay, this is the future.
Yeah, the pitch for HoloLens always seemed interesting. You have an HVAC technician repairing something and then overlays what's going on, and it seemed very enterprisey as far as like versus you have these custom overlays versus this more general computing platform that Apple is like. You have all these apps, and there is some augmented reality, but Apple Vision Pro's approach seems to be more app based versus these more niche markets.
Yeah, look, those headset, like the HoloLens and even the Magic Leap 2, you would tend to buy as an enterprise or for a vertical application, right? Like you would expect that the individual using them would be in that app for the vast majority of the time that was using it. Whereas I think Apple have taken that real spatial computing approach to, hey, we want you to be in this a lot more of the time in your general computing experience, and not necessarily having to be in an app all the time. And I think one of the greatest things that Apple is doing is providing this real transition experience for people. So again, going from, okay, well, I've currently got a Mac and I use a bunch of apps on that, and I'm very familiar with that. And I might have an iPad, but I get what an iPad app looks like, and now I can put that up in my spatial computing experience. And they know that they haven't got a bunch of AR experiences and full immersive experiences that they can go straight to out of the gate, right? So it's this real opportunity to transition customers from going, buy this thing, you can use it from day one with the stuff that you know and love. And by the way, there's all these additional aspects that over time will build up, right? And people understand better. And while I think there's obviously a lot of experience in the VR space of creating fully immersive experiences and a lot in the 2D screen space, I think the most interesting for us is in that middle ground, that volumetric experience that is shared with the other windows. Because when you're in a fully immersive experience, you can't have it as a shared experience with other apps and windows. They all close down or disappear. But that volumetric one where I can have 3D objects and 3D interactions, but alongside the other things that I'm doing, I think is the most exciting. And I think that's the area that will show the most growth once people get these in their hands and can see the power of those types of experiences.
Yeah. In your mind, Apple Vision Pro has the potential to succeed where others have failed from hardware perspective. Like, you're able to read text and not be fatigued by that experience. Like, is the hardware the standout, or is it the operating system, a combination of both, I guess?
Yeah, it's a good Apple product, right? So it's
right.
the opportunity is in both the software and the hardware and getting those things right. I think, we're already starting to see the other headset makers sort of, I'm sure they've had plans for many years, but they're already looking at aspects of what Apple is doing and tuning it to that. So one of the best things, as I said, was that Apple takes you into your reality. It doesn't put things in front of you by default when you first enter the experience. And I think that's really powerful. The quality of the visual, is widely reported as very high quality, the quality of the screens that people are looking at. You can get a higher quality headset with something like a Vario, right? But the price is even more expensive, double the cost. Plus you have to have it tethered to a PC. Great for vertical, if you want to render a Ferrari or something and look at it in detail. But this is a nice middle ground of combining super high-end visuals, a device that's comfortable to wear, it doesn't have controllers. They've taken a really good approach to that. And again, as I said, you can use day one because you probably use a bunch of these apps and things already. So Apple's picked, a sweet spot on a whole range of those aspects that I think will create an amazing V1 experience. It's not going to be an everyday consumer experience. I think we're years away from that, but it's a very strong starting position. And I think using these types of platforms, you really have to experience it and interact with it. As good as a simulator is, it's just not the same, right? And I keep using the analogy, back to the mobile, of trying to design a good mobile app on a desktop screen, right? Like, you don't have the ability for that direct manipulation. You just don't get that you can carry this thing around in the world and pull it out of your pocket and things like that. And it's very similar to AVP. Like, some of the nuances in the interaction design are going to take not some getting used to because they're very natural, but they're very different to how we interact with computing today. That will open up a whole new range of opportunities.
This episode of Vision Pros is sponsored by Glisten. Glisten is a different kind of podcast app that helps immerse you in a language you are learning. Glisten stands for Good Listen. It is the only podcast player app designed specifically for language learners, and is coming soon to the Apple Vision Pro. Listen to compelling foreign language podcasts on your way to language fluency. Glisten makes it possible, utilizing repetitive listening workouts, which are like a trip to the gym for your ears. Using the latest AI technology, Glisten determines where sentences start and end, then repeats each sentence as many times as you need to grasp it. You can also read along with the transcript that Glisten generates automatically, learning new words and deciphering difficult passages. The key to stepping beyond introductory language apps is to start listening to native speakers. Glisten immerses you in a foreign language, taking your listening comprehension to the next level. With Glisten, you can learn English, Spanish, French, German, Italian, Portuguese, Dutch, Japanese, Chinese, and Korean, with more languages coming very soon. When I was learning Japanese a few years back, I made it a point to open up a Japanese iTunes store account and purchase many big blockbusters that I knew inside and out with Japanese audio. I also listened to the official Monster Hunter podcast from Japan. This is an app I really wish existed back then. This podcast app transforms the hundreds upon hundreds of hours of podcasts into a tool to help you learn a new language. The app does a great job at helping you discover podcasts in the language you are working on learning, and even has a special search and directory of language learning podcasts. This is one of those apps that I think will truly shine on the Apple Vision Pro. One category of apps tons of press have been talking about have been the meditation apps, and Glisten, I think, will shine in the same way, that you can have a very focused experience where you can really pay attention to the podcast, follow the transcript, and maybe have another window open with a dictionary. Glisten provides tons of different audio workouts aimed at either speaking or listening. Examples include the do-over, which repeats each sentence once, the kitchen sink, which repeats often with pauses. For speaking workouts, there are things included such as read my lips, which repeats each sentence twice, and then gives time to repeat it yourself. Or you can try the slow shadowing, which plays slowly twice when you try to speak with the audio shadowing on the third time. There are many more audio exercises included, and I can't wait to try these out in visionOS when that version launches. To get started before Apple Vision Pro arrives, head on to the App Store and download Glisten for iPhone, Apple Watch, and iPad. It is free to download and get started with, and if you want even more from the app, give Glisten Pro a try to unlock the full feature set. My thanks to Glisten for sponsoring this episode of Vision Pros. So what has your team been working on for visionOS so far that you can share?
Yeah, so we're kind of different in that we don't, because we're a user experience consultancy, we don't have development capability, right? Like that's not, we work with third-party developers, we work with our clients' developers, etc. But we don't have that capability in-house. But we do want to understand the full process of taking an idea from looking at the customer needs and behaviors, sketching that out, understanding what the relevant aspects, what does AVP add to their experience, how's it going to contribute to their everyday lives. And we do want to see the different paths and the different strengths and weaknesses of those different approaches, right? I can design a 2D experience, that's really not our thing for AVP. You can design a shared volumetric experience. As I said, that's really interesting for us. But we also want to see what that experience would be like in an immersive experience. And one of the reasons for that is that with the immersive experience, you can leverage ARKit, whereas in the shared experiences, you can't. And to us, that's kind of unfortunate, right? Because we can't do things like plane detection in a shared space. But we want to understand what those capabilities are in a fully immersive space. So we're actually building a little set of utilities is probably the best way of describing them. And we frame them as what we call ambient information visualization. So we're not going to do a big app that's going to be a car game or a word processor or anything like that. We want to create these little objects that sit in these people's spatial computing experiences and give them insight into a particular thing that they might be interested in. So there's these little tiny things that run alongside your other windows and things like that. In fact, I've bought the domain desk accessories, as in excess, as opposed to the original Mac early system desk accessories, like the calculator and things like that, because we think there are these bunch of little objects that can just live around your world, right? And it gives us the opportunity to create these little things in both of these experiences. And in fact, so the volumetric in the shared space, We're working with another iOS developer, Jan, who's great in ARKit. So he's looking at the fully immersive view of that, just to try those things out. And then we've also had a Unity prototype developer that we work with for the stuff that we do with Magic Leap. He's actually created the same experience in the Magic Leap 2 using the windowing, so we can use the gestures and the gaze, not quite as high fidelity as obviously the AVP, but we can simulate that experience in a Magic Leap. And then we've taken that path of using the Unity plugin to explore how to pull that into. So our aim as a UX consultancy is we can talk to our clients and say we have experience in exploring these three paths, but also to other UX designers, we want to explain to them how to design for these different experiences and what the strengths and weaknesses of each of those paths are.
Gotcha. So Unity's been a pretty important tool for actually testing this stuff in Magic Leap and then porting it over to Apple's frameworks. Is that right?
Exactly. So, we've known for a while, we've expected for a while that something would be happening in this space. So we did a whole bunch of exploration, talking to designers and devs about what they might want from this future device before Apple had even announced. We did a whole bunch of prototypes of experiences of what most of them were an optical see-through, so a smart glasses type Apple experience might be. Obviously, that hasn't eventuated, so we've now tuned that. But the Magic Leap 2 is a good headset to sort of play with that, because we don't have our hands on on an AVP, and we're in Australia, so we probably won't get through the retail here for a while yet.
Yeah. Are you guys going to look at importing one for an astronomical price on eBay or something?
I have the luxury of having two brothers-in-law in Los Angeles, so I might see if they can send me something, and we'll see how that goes.
Oh, very nice, yes. So the term spatial computing was new to me in June when Apple introduced visionOS, but this is something you've been talking about for years at this point. Is Apple's vision of spatial computing the same as you guys were conceptualizing this before Apple shared their vision of what spatial computing could be? Yeah,
I think the whole aspect of spatial computing is really fascinating. It sort of goes back to the mid-90s, 1995, I think it was. Simon Greenwald sort of coined the term, and it was really about how can computing understand the environment, and that real direction was around how can computing understand the objects and the environment so that my work and play can be enhanced. We can be a better partner with the computer because it can understand what's around me and the context of use. And that really evolved. And there's a great book called The Infinite Retina by Cronin and Scoble that really goes into spatial computing and AR in great detail. But I think it's this unique combination of having multimodal interaction design, so that's a core thing, but also understanding the physical environment. And I think Apple have really executed that well with the AVP. They've really ticked all the boxes. I think there's detail, as I said, like not supporting ARKit in a volumetric space. I think that's an opportunity for improvement. I think playing with these volumes in the spatial, like locking them or not having grab handles, again, are opportunities for the future. But it is like, if you look at all the headsets now, it's probably it is the ultimate spatial computing headset.
Yeah. So limitations of the API, you mentioned ARKit's a big one. I guess just using the camera itself seems like such a big potential limiting thing as far as let me identify stuff in the room and work with it.
Yeah, and I totally understand the privacy and security approach to that. And to me, it feels like a version 1 thing. Like they want to lock it down as much as possible, but in the future, I think there might be opportunities where they'll open up certain things because they'll understand the use case, and you can't cater to every use case straight out of the box, right? Like it's that sort of thing where it's better to err on the safe side than to go out with everything open. As people who run a lot of usability testing, one of the things that we want to make sure we can see is obviously when people are using the headset, that we can see their experience, how they're interacting from their perspective. So that's critical for us, for example.
Yeah. The privacy angle of the killer use of this, you're at a party, you can, who everybody is just with a little avatar above their head or something. But privacy would forbid that from ever functioning.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, a lot of our sort of little concepts that we explored were around things like that, right? And it's fun to play with because, a lot of the work that we've had the opportunity to do are around wearable devices. So, tracking sports players and getting live player data, or we worked with a company doing yoga pants that were hooked up to sensors to detect, whether you're in the right position and things like that. And a lot of these projects have the opportunity to explore that future state, to see where the boundaries are, right? Because we can't run into this, especially as UX designers, run into this trying to do everything from the start, because there's so much nuance to this that we have to be careful about these things and really take our time. And there's the group, the XR Guild, run by Avi Barziv and others, who I think are doing a great job of sort of highlighting, those particular aspects, and also accessibility aspects are critical as well, right? Because they're fundamentally important to a new platform, and especially on the accessibility side, I think Apple's really done a great job of baking it in from the start, so that it's not just an add-on. And there's a lot of opportunity for a whole range of people to engage with this platform in a way that they just simply couldn't with different platforms potentially.
Yeah. My dream, like 20 years from now, when it is just a little tiny glasses you can throw on, is my grocery store. I can put these on, and instead of spending an hour trying to find whatever spice, it can walk me through, here's my grocery list, let me walk through the store as efficiently as possible and point out where that tiny spice jar might be on the shelf.
Yeah. And that's kind of the exciting thing, right? Like, I think if people sit down, they can think of a bunch of different opportunities that this type of device will open up for them. And that's why, we're very excited about V1, but we're also looking to a future state of 5, 10, 15 years or whatever that is, because the opportunities around that are even greater, right? And yeah, it's fun just exploring them and understanding people's needs and behaviors and how to extrapolate those and address those needs and behaviors in a different way with this platform.
Yeah. I'll be so curious about the hardware ramp up with generation to generation. Mm-hmm. Apple Watch rapidly improved year to year. It went from this slow, cruddy thing to fast with GPS. Then we had cellular on the watch. Then this redesign with ECG, and then always on display. And it seemed like every year was just a revolutionary upgrade. iPhone early years were drastic improvements as well. Like most of the Apple platforms early on were pretty fast paced. Do you think that it'll be slower for Apple Vision Pro? Is the technology just so much harder to improve on this quickly?
There's a guy in the industry called Carl Guttag, and I think it was him that phrased that. He said, "You can't buy physics." And basically what he was saying is, no matter how much money Meta or Apple have, because of the nature of physics and light and things like that, there's only certain things you can actually do. So I think that's an interesting frame of reference. But I try to look at it and go, is the AVP similar to the iPhone? And that's different because people had phones that they used daily before the iPhone came. It just changed the nature of interaction and so on. So I don't think it's as similar to that. Could you compare a Bondi Blue iMac and the size and depth of that compared to an iMac today, right? Where and maybe that's a better analogy. I'm not sure, but I actually think it's kind of interesting. And while I'm not a huge fan of the Meta business model, I do have a great appreciation for what they're doing at both ends of the spectrum. So they've got the Meta Quest Pro, which obviously isn't as high end as the Apple Vision Pro, but it's that direction, and it's video pass through. And at the other end, they're playing around with the Meta Ray Bans, right, which are going to have an AI built into them and can see the camera view and things like that. And so they've sort of got both ends covered. And at some point, I can't get my head around how Apple doesn't address the optical see-through at some point, right? If you want to get to smart glasses, it can't be video cameras anymore. And that's going to change the field of view significantly. It's going to change a whole bunch of things. And that's why I think Meta's quite smart in that they've taken both ends of the spectrum and they're going to probably work towards the middle, right? That just makes sense. So to me, is this the Pro version of the Apple Vision? And is there going to be more a Google Glass type version that's like a companion to your iPhone, like your Apple Watch is, or the same sort of satellite of devices type of approach that covers that bottom end, right? And I think that would be fascinating. So, yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see the different form factors. I've said before on the podcast, Mac OS has laptops, desktops, all-in-one desktops, and different form factors. iOS has all these different form factors. iPod Touch back in the day, and iPad, and yeah. So I'll be curious to see the different form factors that come out of this. So, as far as the interaction method, how do you see the hand tracking and not needing a traditional VR controller? I'd imagine for most day-to-day applications, that's pro. For gaming, less pro, less good for if you're wanting it for that kind of dedicated gaming experience.
Yeah. Look, I can imagine, and to be honest, I have to. I'm not a gamer at all, so,
yeah.
So I don't have that view on things. But to me, not having that controller as a core element of the interaction design really enables a whole bunch of people to use it, not only because of physical dexterity, but just that, as I said before, of just putting the thing on and, things to lose and things to run out of battery and, where is it? Oh, I can see through with video, pass through, but, so I think this approach that Apple have taken with a very simple set of gestures and very, from all reports, accurate eye gaze and for navigation, I think that combination is super powerful. Again, we're introducing a new platform to people. Get the basics right. Do that really well. Make it feel super natural to those people. And then over time, through custom gestures, if you're in a specific app, or even I see sort of this opportunity probably more for power users is over time when I have my spatial computing experience that I do a gesture that's sort of like my shortcut, right? Like leveraging Apple shortcuts to do something because I make this particular gesture, it's going to go and get that bit of information, or it's going to present these windows or whatever it's going to be, right? So I think starting with that basic set is the perfect place to start. I think it will evolve from there.
Yeah. I always wondered if we'll get a glove one day that has haptics in it for Apple Vision Pro when you're...
Well, there's been patents around rings, and there's some interesting stuff around devices like watches, etc. So I think it certainly seems like they're exploring those types of things, and there's a lot going on in this. If we talk about spatial computing and contextual computing more broadly, we've just recently had finally the announcement of the Humane AI pin, right? Which is as a lot of people from Apple in the past. But looking at this whole different way of using a camera to understand the environment and creating experiences off that. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a really interesting time as computing starts to understand the world around it, either through video cameras like the AVP and sensors on the AVP, or through to AI enabling various aspects of these interactions as well.
Yeah, and your mind is amazing at playing tricks on you. I remember the first Oculus Quest demo back in the day. It was like the original Oculus, and there was this demo I played with just a regular controller of this little tiny toy soldier knight, and he jumped on my shoulder, and I could have sworn I felt something on my shoulder. Like, it's, even in those early days, like, your mind can sometimes, if it's done right, trick you.
Yeah, I listened to a great podcast ages ago, and I can't remember what it was, but it talked about this concept of what's called umwelt, or understanding the environment, like how an organism understands the environment that it sits within, and that ultimately everything is an electrical signal going into the brain, right? So, what people and Roni Abowitz, who created Magic Leap, has talked about this of, you know, what's the fine line between tricking the brain through the various senses, you know, especially the eyes, but also sound and touch and haptics and, you know, those sorts of things, where it overrides our understanding that this isn't real, and it becomes as good as real, or, you know, as close to a simulation of real, that we are wholly invested and emotionally invested or engaged with this experience. It's a very powerful thing. And coming back to the XR Guild, you know, we've got to be super careful with these types of things as we create them.
Yeah. So for many years now, it was kind of a running joke, Apple showing off augmented reality games and applications at WWDC, you know, building Legos while you're holding an iPad in your hand.
Yeah.
It's like, how ridiculous is that? But I'm curious, all these ridiculous things doing with your iPhone or iPad in your hand, how translatable are these things to visionOS? Is Reality Kit, you said, has to be fully immersive. If you are fully immersive, can they bring all those experiences to visionOS?
Yeah, to me, that should be a relatively smooth path. And, you know, that constraint of needing to hold a device in just the right way, in just the right angle, and move it around with this very small window to view this type of content changes. And a lot of those assets should be, I would expect, would be able to be reused, essentially, probably updated, but reused, and again adapted to the gestures that we now have. But again, it's quite a simple set of gestures, and because of the nature of interacting with the screen on the iPhone and the iPad, it was a pretty simple set of gestures, generally speaking, anyway. So to me, that seems like a smooth path. But yeah. We see the opportunity to think through things from scratch, right? And for us, that's our particular perspective, because while we did some of those, like, it wasn't our core focus. And the opportunity to start with a new platform and leverage the power of that platform without the constraints or the modalities, the interaction methods, etc., of other ones, I think is a unique opportunity with this headset, and to really get it right for this particular platform.
Yeah. So you shared with me that you published a research paper on wearable augmented reality. What were some of your findings in this paper? I believe it was like 4 years in the making of researching, and anything we haven't covered yet that you'd like to touch on here?
Yeah, look, it comes back to that aspect of human-computer interaction, and I think more so than any other platform that we have designed for, there is a lot that has a deeper background in human-computer interaction because of the combination of modalities of seeing and voice and gestures and all of these types of things. So I've had an adjunct position with Sydney University for a number of years. I've taught there for 9 years on interaction design. And so we did a collaborative research paper driven by Tram Tran, a PhD student there. And we looked at the last 5 years of academic research into head-mounted augmented reality. So these types of headsets, HoloLens is the standout one. And we've really tried to track how the research is changing. And the academic research into this space is really transitioning from more about the functionality of the hardware and getting it to work, things like tracking and SLAM and, you know, all that sort of stuff, to more things around the consumer experience. So the interaction design, the ethics of these types of experiences. There's a great paper that looks at how skin is rendered differently in AR and what the impact is for different populations, right? And the ethics around that. Accessibility is another one, right? That is the research area. Those research areas are really growing as they become more important as the consumer starts to uptake these types of devices. So I think we'll only see an acceleration around that. But it's a great indicator on where their industry's focusing, because a lot of these are driven by companies like Meta and Apple and people like that, these research papers. So it can be good insight into where things are going. And it gives you a good background onto all the different types of research. So, people have even been researching that future state where that person's name's above the head. If that happens, how do I feel as the person viewing that? And how do I feel as the person who has my label above my head, right? So people are trying to investigate these things again ahead of time before we start designing these experiences and just rolling them out everywhere.
Yeah, I'd imagine in Apple's ecosystem, like if they're in your contact book, maybe it uses like the AirTag chip to tell you, oh, you already verified that it's okay for me to get reminded of who you are, since his or her Apple Watch may be on and tells you, hey, that is me. We've met before.
And I think this is the amazing thing about the Apple ecosystem is if you look around you and all the opportunities that the platform has, right? Because of, HomePods, because of other IoT devices, lights and things like that. So one of the prototypes that we played with was looking at a light and gesturing and turning the light on and off, right? And people say, well, why don't you just say, turn the light on? And I might be on the phone or something, right? So we have to think through all these different opportunities, and the strength of the Apple platform is how these all tie together in very unique ways, right? That universal control of me being able to slide my cursor across from my Mac onto my iPad, that's unique to this platform because of the tight integration that these devices have. Things like, the AirTags, things like the HomeKit devices. These will present so many different opportunities for combination. And I think, Apple will obviously enable a bunch of those that they're in a very unique position to do. But that opens up so many opportunities for other designers and developers to also to think, how can we connect these in interesting ways that will benefit people and make their lives better? Yeah.
How impactful do you think Apple's work in AI? I use that the term as general as you can, because it means a whole lot of different things to different people.
That's right.
But 2024, people have said Apple's going to be doing a lot of stuff with their OSs that leverage that technology. How big could this be for visionOS and what you can do there?
Yeah, I see AI as an enabling layer, right? Like it's a way things can be enhanced in interesting and unique ways. And I think particular to the Apple Vision Pro type experience, there's a guy called Russ, and I forget his last name. He's at Shopify, and he sort of does a lot of the future state prototyping. And he's got this amazing demonstration of a future state where the person is talking to their intelligent agent, which is obviously enabled by AI, because I think it's really important to differentiate those, so the modality, the intelligent agent, the Siri, the whatever, and what brings that to life. But he's talking to that about a shopping experience. So he wants to buy, he's interested in latte art. So the intelligent agent brings up 3 AR models of different coffee machines and puts them on his bench, right, in his kitchen. So he can see them and turn them around, and he sort of talks to the AI and asks them about various qualities of these things, and the AI takes one away because, and then, I'll ring that up for me. I want to find some cups that would suit this as well. And so this whole opportunity around intelligent agents and conversational interaction for people, with an awareness of the context of use and the objects within your world, I think is hugely powerful. And that's what Meta's sort of starting to talk about for their AI and their glasses on their Ray-Bans. So I think if you're looking at a Siri version of that for AVP and enhanced in this way, I think that's, it will be very powerful if it's done right. But again, there's so much nuance in getting that stuff done right that you have to really make it feel natural and sensible. And all of us have had experience with intelligent agents that feel neither natural nor useful, to be honest. But hopefully that will be enhanced.
So it just struck me as I was writing up the notes that this is episode 7. And so far, 3 out of the 7 episodes are from people in your neck of the woods, Australia and New Zealand. I know you guys don't like to clump those two together.
I know, we love the New Zealanders. we had Clarko, you had James. Yeah, I was. It was fascinating.
Do you have a sense on is that just a coincidence, or is there a big interest in this part of the world for AR VR stuff?
It's a great question. Look, it's a good community down here. I think there's a lot of, though, Clarko's obviously been in the US for a number of years. So, and James, I don't know directly, but he obviously comes from that iOS background and that game background of creating games for iOS. So I don't think there's probably an overarching stronger VR community that's been there for a number of years. But it's certainly something that we're looking at now, and we've connected with a bunch of people all around Australia who are particularly interested in Apple Vision Pro and augmented reality and spatial computing, and trying to network those together. So my expectation is it's largely coincidence. I think it's actually a question for you. How have you found these people?
I don't know. It's kind of fun. It is funny where what parts of the world people kind of prop up and kind of identify. Yeah.
That's great to see.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Yeah, one of these days I'll have to get down over there.
Please do, absolutely.
Yeah. So, we're recording this at the very end of December here, and we're hearing more firm things that February is the likely launch timeframe for Apple Vision Pro. So I suspect that we're gonna have an Apple event sometime between now and then. What unanswered questions do you hope Apple addresses in that presentation?
I think Apple has only shown us, a very small aspect of what this device can do, and I think that launch will probably showcase a much broader range of things, particularly in the volumetric and potentially the fully immersive space.
Yeah.
The questions that I have are more, because I've had the opportunity to use it a couple of times, are less about the device and its capabilities. The questions I have are more about access, to the rest of the world, because it is US first, and to really almost beyond version 1, right? I think I expect that will be fairly locked by this stage, but it's sort of more the roadmap, which traditionally, obviously, Apple don't talk about. So I'm excited about it. I'm very keen to get my hands on one and have it in the office. And I think, as I said before, it's about how can we enable more ARKit functionality within that shared space. That's, and back to those other elements of, are they interested in this space, the elements of spatial computing just being around and being part of the environment, as opposed to a particular app or an in-depth experience, is how we might frame it. So I think we'll see signs of that, whether they have examples themselves or they're showcasing third parties that they've identified and will be showing off. We'll see.
Yeah, and it'll be super curious.
And price, obviously.
The price,
for Australia.
Yes. Starting at $3,499, what does it end at? Is it?
Yeah.
Is that?
And we've got the joy of conversion to the Australian dollar, which is not very good at the moment.
Yeah, so. I am so curious if there will be multiple storage SKUs and what that would look like. Like, am I going to spend an extra $1,000 to get the max storage or whatnot?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Anything we haven't covered on spatial computing or any other topics before we wrap it up?
I don't think so. I think, as I said, this is a really new platform, and one of the trickiest things with all of spatial computing and AR, and I think Apple will really, be a leader in this space, is getting people to understand the opportunities, right? Like we went to the Augmented Reality World Expo in Santa Clara in June, the week before that Apple launched. Yin was at the launch of the Apple Vision Pro. But I was really impressed with the whole industry sort of looking forward to Apple coming in. It wasn't like, oh, it's going to be shit and, all that sort of stuff. It was, sorry, I don't know whether it's... Yeah. But they were really positive because they knew that would bring a lot of attention. And one of the trickiest things is you need to get someone in a headset for them to truly understand this experience. It's not like you can show them a mobile phone and they can just hold it for a second. They have to put this thing on. Their eyes have to be calibrated. It's not a simple onboarding experience necessarily compared to other types of devices. So, Apple's retail store, I think, are going to play a critical part in this, but also us using it as designers and developers to understand that nuance in interaction design so that we can really leverage the power of the platform.
Yeah, it is, as you said, you need to wear it to actually understand. Like, it's so hard to describe. Like, when I say, like, when I watch PSVR 2 for just movies, it's hard to describe that it does feel like I'm in an IMAX kind of theater versus just holding an iPad in front of my face real close. Like, it's way different, even though it shouldn't be conceptually, but it is. Just the way it works. I mean,
and we heard all the reporters the other day talking about the spatial photos and the spatial videos, right? Like, it's a whole new area, right?
I'm so
Even
excited
the panoramas
for that. Yeah. I have a 1-year-old daughter, and I've been doing a lot of spatial video captures of her doing adorable things. So I'm very excited to see what that's like in a month or so. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm so glad they brought that to the phone as quickly as they did.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious why they didn't do any photo capture. It's just video for spatial.
It's a really interesting question. I've been because one of the things with video is when you move with a video with an iPhone, if you're recording the spatial video, when you're wearing the headset, you're obviously not moving. So I'm kind of interested in that disconnect between the videos moving, but I'm not moving.
Yeah.
Whereas with a photo, obviously, I thought it would have been the simpler place to start, not only technically, but also from, it's just a one shot and it's from that position. That's
right.
That's,
and you can maybe turn your head around it to kind of look at different perspectives that way.
Exactly. And I think it'll be I think I saw something from Apple's research teams on Gaussian splatting the other day, but that whole thing of how can I get a full scan almost, whether it's the leveraging room plan or something that they've got from an API perspective, but more detail than that to model the whole environment, to retain a memory in that sense. I think there's a lot of opportunity in that moving forward.
Yeah, so it'll be very interesting. And I know people have been dissing on the spatial video capture as they translate it to like MetaQuest headsets, but I have to feel the way Apple's going to implement it will take advantage of that 1080p to make it really shine, because the experiences we've been hearing from the press are drastically different from those that have just like put it through a translator for MetaQuest,
Yeah, look, I think that sort of experimentation is fun and great that people do it, but it's not going to be like the real thing.
Yeah. Well, anyways, this has been a really fun chat. I've enjoyed learning more about what you do and this whole space. And where can people find you online and the work your company does?
So we for 13 years, I think we were called Mobile Experience, but now we call Contxtual. So it's CONTXTU.al is our URL. And then you can scroll down you can hit the spatial computing section and you'll go and see all the video prototypes that we've been working on and playing with. I'm on Mastodon as Oliver W. I'm not on Twitter anymore as Oliver W, but you can probably connect there. And LinkedIn, of course.
Excellent.
But thanks so much for having me on, Tim. It's been great. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, this was great. And yeah, do check out those prototypes. We did not have time to touch on them, but there are a lot of really cool ones, and some stuff like the walking directions that I know Apple has disallowed navigation for safety reasons at this time, but maybe in the future they'll figure that out. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, Tim.
Well, that's my interview with Oliver. My thanks to Oliver for his time recording, and my thanks to you for your time and attention tuning in. My thanks again to Glisten for sponsoring this episode. Download Glisten for iPad, iPhone, and Apple Watch now from the App Store. Look out for Glisten on the Apple Vision Pro's App Store when that launches very soon here. As a reminder, you can get early access to both Vision Pros and iPad Pros by supporting the podcast at visionpros.fm/Patreon or by subscribing in Apple Podcasts. With that, I'll talk to you ever again real soon.